Okay, so today we're going to connect two places that you probably don't think about in the same breath, Venezuela and Taiwan. We're diving into a hypothetical scenario that honestly raises some pretty heavy questions about how global power works.
And that brings us to the big question, a really chilling one at that. It's the whole reason we're doing this explainer. If a superpower like the US can pull off a move like this, what's to stop another superpower like China from thinking, hey, maybe we can do something similar? It's a huge deal for global stability, and it all starts with a precedent.
So, to really get our heads around the ripple effects this could have, we first have to break down what's happening in part one of this scenario, this hypothetical US raid on Venezuela. So, let's break this down. What's so interesting here is how you've got the official story, and then you've got the criticism. On paper, it's simple. Two separate sovereign countries. The stated reason for going in, it's a law enforcement action against drug trafficking. But the source material also points out a pretty clear economic angle. U.S. companies would be ready to jump in and rebuild the oil industry for profit. And it's no surprise that critics would look at that and call it what it is, blatant imperialism. All right, now let's hop over to the other side of the planet. Because the situation with China and Taiwan, well, it's a completely different ballgame. The context is fundamentally different in just about every way you can imagine. And this is absolutely key. Everything, and I mean everything, hinges on this term breakaway province. In Beijing's official view, Taiwan isn't a foreign country. It's part of China, a piece of its own territory that's temporarily gone its own way. So in their eyes, this isn't an international conflict, it's a domestic problem that needs to be solved.
And you've got to understand, this isn't just some political talking point. The source is very clear. Beijing believes that reunification is going to happen, one way or another. It's seen as inevitable. President Xi has even ordered the military to be fully prepared for any scenario to make sure it does. The determination here is just absolute.
Okay, so look at this side by side. It just lays it all out, right? On one side, you have the US and Venezuela, an action across international borders sold as law enforcement. On the other, China and Taiwan, framed as an internal affair, a mission of national reunification. The entire legal and political argument rests on a totally different foundation. It's apples and oranges. So you'd think the conclusion is obvious, right? If the US does this in Venezuela, it gives China the perfect excuse, a green light to do what it wants. But hold on, because this is where the source material throws a massive curveball, a really fascinating counterintuitive twist.
I mean, seriously, just pause and think about that for a second. How on earth could one act of aggression by a superpower possibly stop another one in its tracks? It doesn't seem to make any sense. And here it is. This is the wild part of the whole argument. The idea is that the sheer, shocking, overwhelming success of a modern military strike, like the one in this hypothetical raid, might not be an invitation to copy it. Instead, it could serve as a terrifying warning about the real costs of modern warfare.
Let's connect the dots here, because the logic is pretty powerful. Imagine this hypothetical raid is a total success. We're talking total control in just a few hours, with 0 US casualties. That's an incredible display of military power. But here's the thing. Taiwan is not an easy target. It is a well-armed, well-trained adversary, and it's backed by some of the best weapons the US has. Plus, it has a huge natural advantage. And that advantage is 100 miles of open water. 100 miles. The Taiwan Strait is one of the toughest military challenges for an amphibious invasion anywhere on the planet. So if you're China and you see just how devastating a swift surgical strike can be, you might think twice about launching a much more complicated, much bloodier operation like crossing that strait. So where does that leave us? What's the takeaway here? Well, the thing is, this one hypothetical event doesn't just point in one direction. Instead, it creates two totally different, competing possibilities for what the future of global security could look like. When you zoom out, the bigger picture here is about the rules of the game, or maybe the lack of them. At the end of the day, what a scenario like this really shows is just how fragile that rules-based international order we hear about actually is. When a superpower decides it's going to do what it wants, the entire system suddenly feels very, very shaky.
And that brings us right back to the central question. Does setting this kind of precedent just open the floodgates to chaos, where any powerful nation can do whatever it wants? Or, just maybe, does such a shocking display of military force serve as a sobering wake-up call, a deterrent that actually makes a huge war less likely? The source material doesn't give us an easy answer because, well, there isn't one.